Welcome back for another episode of Husky Careers Unleashed. My name's Ryan and I'll be your host. And our guest today comes from our career services family. So we've got Melissa here with us, and let's kick off the episode by having her introduce herself.
Hey there, I'm Melissa Michaelson. My official title is Assistant Director for Career Development and Education. And what that means is I get to help students find jobs for after they graduate from college.
So our topic today is going to be kind of talking about career paths or jobs that don't necessarily relate to your college degree. And I feel like it's really common in the collegiate space. People think whatever their degree is, that's the field they're going to end up in. But as soon as you're out in industry, you realize very quickly that a lot of people's degrees have no direct correlation to their jobs, especially as they get longer into their career journey. Let's jump in with a little bit of your background and kind of how you got to where you are today.
So I did not go to college to become a career advisor and an assistant director for career education and development. I don't think there is such a degree. But my story is that I was a non-traditional and a first-gen student here at Michigan Tech from 2012 to 2016. So I knew that I was not ever going to be an engineer, but I did want to go to college. And I happened to live here in Houghton, and my choices for college were what was in my backyard. So Michigan Tech was in my backyard. And when I enrolled, I started off in the humanities department. And I just wanted to get my feet wet, see what it felt like to just be a college student. And I soon realized that humanities was not necessarily what I wanted to continue to study, but I had a class that exposed me more to kind of the social sciences and especially anthropology. I happened to read a book that was written by an anthropologist, and I'm like, I get this, and I'm super interested in how the book was researched and written. And so I then found out that Michigan Tech offered an anthropology degree. So I switched into the social sciences department from humanities, and that's kind of where that journey began. But to tell the truth, after about 2 years, I would say 2 to 3 years of being a student and taking classes, which I absolutely loved, I realized that I did not want to be an anthropologist. I loved what I was studying, but the idea of becoming an anthropologist was just not what I wanted to do. And then I thought, well, then why am I studying this if it's not going to lead to the job of what the name of the degree is? So I was nervous about that, actually. I wasn't quite sure how that was going to all turn out, but I just kind of finished off my studies. I took a look at some other research opportunities, and I got involved with different things that allowed me to gain experiences and kind of try them out. And what I realized then is that I actually think like an anthropologist. So when I came to that realization, then I could ask myself, well, if I think like an anthropologist, first of all, what does that mean? But second of all, where can I apply those skills in that way of thinking? And so when I think about approaching problems, to me, as a person who thinks like an anthropologist, that means that I'm looking for root cause. I'm digging for like what's behind and underneath what this current thing is in front of me. What other factors contribute to this situation? How would I approach this problem through the lens of somebody from a different place or different culture? Trying to get an insight into how people think, what makes them tick. And once I put that together, then I could see, start thinking about ways that I could use that skill set. And so that kind of not indirectly actually brought me here to career services, where I am working with students one on one, and we're kind of digging in and getting behind what their interests are and how they think and how they process information and how they approach problems. And then I get to help them know how to communicate that out with people and really parse out what their skill sets are and where can those skill sets be applied. So it's been an interesting kind of journey to get where I'm at. And that was kind of the way that I arrived at where I'm sitting right now.
Well, and as somebody who also has kind of a career path that is no longer related to my degree, kind of having that mindset is what I kind of refer back to. So, my background's mechanical engineering, but I am much more in the content media marketing space now. And so, my takeaway from my engineering degree was problem solving. Like, we were taught the problem solving mindset and the thought process behind it. And so all of those principles can still be applied to marketing, even though it's not a technical degree, so to speak. So, just another example of how you can take one degree that seems like there's no direct correlation, but find that connection and really pivot kind of where you want to go in your career.
Yes, I so agree with that. And I often do tell students when we talk about careers, there are very few careers that actually need the degree that the career is named after, right? If you want to be an engineer, you do need an engineering degree. If you want to be a doctor, you do need to go to medical school, right? But then there's everything else. So there's a lot of options out there.
Well, and one of the most valuable aspects of having a degree, in my opinion, is it's proof that you know how to learn.
Yes.
And when you're looking at job applications and trying to figure out like responsibilities, expectations, things like that for that position, if you see things on that list that maybe don't directly align with your degree or what you've been taught, don't necessarily worry about those little things because that employer is going to teach you anything that you need to know that you may not have the knowledge on. And again, having that degree proves to them that you can go into a situation where you may not know anything about a topic, but you're willing to put in the effort to learn and be able to apply those new skills as you're kind of growing throughout your journey. At any point since graduating, have you ever felt kind of the pressure to quote unquote use your degree versus kind of how you've talked about ways you've correlated to it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, I don't really feel that when I think about not using my degree directly. But where I do feel something is when people ask me what my degree is, or if I tell the story about what my degree is, it's like I have to come back because people kind of like maybe roll their eyes or they're like, well, why would you even want that kind of degree? Like what kind of job market is there for that degree, right? And that's when I feel it sometimes. And however, when I think back about the when I was in school, when I was studying, I don't regret any of that. I feel like so much of what I learned really honed in on the skills. I think what it honed in on is what some of my natural abilities are. And I could then find an outlet for them or find a framework for them or kind of deepen those skills and just then use them in a more practical widely used like I can use them in more widely more generally and to me then what that does is it just opens up my options so much more. That's kind of how I see it.
Well, in the terms of skill set, are there specific skills that you learned either from your personal life or kind of hobbies, pastimes that have helped in your career today that probably weren't directly related to your degree?
Yeah, that's also a really fun question. So I am a big connector. So I connect information and I don't know if that is a skill set that can be written exactly like that on a resume, right? But it like I can synthesize information. I can take disparate information that seems unrelated and actually find common threads and pull it all together into some sort of format that is useful or that makes sense for a situation that we might be finding ourselves in. I might be kind of vague here. I am a kind of a born researcher, right? I'm a born like questioner. I really ask questions and I dig and I look underneath the surface. and I really do, I guess, root cause analysis, but in a maybe in a more intuitive, social way versus having the the normal way that root cause analyses are often thought of in a very standardized kind of process. People skills, right? Being able to sit with a person, communicate, ask questions, get underneath and behind what they're actually asking so that we can really find out the information that's going to be most helpful for to answer the question that they might have.
And I think that makes sense, kind of bridging the gap of things that you aren't taught in school. And I mean, that's a reality for everybody. We learn skills through practical experiences, and we don't spend 24 hours a day inside of a classroom, but we do spend 24 hours a day inside of a learning environment. So there's always opportunities to kind of learn those new skills, tailor them in. And if it's not something that's focused on in your degree path or your educational direct choices, there's still ways to go about kind of finding that information and learning from really any situation that can then be applied to your career.
Yeah, and if I may add, I think the other place we spend 24 hours in is in our own heads. We're taking in information and we're synthesizing and we're figuring it out. And what I think we take for granted is that the way that what goes on in our mind and how we see the world and how we see problems and how we approach things is unique to us. And we might have a framework through the coursework that we've taken, but we also have these abilities that are unique. And if we can communicate and find the confidence to be able to speak out how we see, what our perspective is on this situation, or how we would solve this problem, or how we would approach this problem, or how we would help this person. When we have more confidence in the way our own mind works, and the more that we can articulate that, then I feel like we can be of greater service and of greater help, and then be able to offer that to others and be hired by somebody who appreciates that as well.
So, going back to some of the questions I was looking at ahead of time, this one kind of struck me, and I'm curious what your feedback or opinion is going to be on it. And it's around the topic of success. When we're in a collegiate environment, it's pretty easy because we're getting graded. You pass, you fail, you get A, Bs. Pretty much everything you're doing in a collegiate environment can be established as a success or a failure. So now that you are kind of out in a career separate from that environment that naturally is giving you that feedback, how would you describe success outside of your major that you got a degree in?
So I think one of the hardest transitions from being, say, graded and validated, essentially, that's our validation that we did it right, that we did it well, that we did a good job. And when you don't have that kind of feedback as a validation, it takes a little bit of getting used to, well, how do I know I'm doing a good job if somebody isn't telling me? Or Yeah. So I think if I were to ponder that, I find that the it's still in the form of feedback, but it's a different kind of feedback. I think that when I hear students who come back and say, you know what, Melissa, or Mrs. Michaelson is what they mostly call me, is I got the job that I applied for, or I got the salary that I get negotiated for, or I got into medical school after you helped me prepare for that interview, right? There's different things like that that come through, that come back to me, that makes me feel like, I've this works. I'm really grateful for that. And I think feedback from events or workshops, when I can see the light bulb go on in a student's eyes, or when they affirm to me that they get it and that, oh, this is something new that they didn't know. And this makes such a big difference. And now I'm going to move forward. Like all of that to me feels like success. And I think that it's very one on one and it's a very individual thing. We're going to put on events, we're going to do workshops, no matter who comes, no matter how many people. But it's those one on one kind of when you know you've kind of made a difference in someone's life, that to me feels like I'm in the right spot and this feels good. And this is what success means to me.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to phrase it. And regardless of what industry you're in or career path you're taking, there are those kind of moments you can self reflect and kind of evaluate on your own. Yes, it's great to get that feedback from somebody else. Unfortunately, there's not always managers and hierarchy that leads to those kinds of discussions. So I think having that self reflection and kind of realizing those outcomes on your own is a great way to be able to kind of measure that success without needing that direct external feedback that we got so accustomed to in a
Mhm.
collegiate setting.
Yeah.
Um, so if a student were to come into you and say they feel like they're stuck in their major or they're not sure that it's the right fit, what kind of advice or conversations would you have with them to kind of figure out, is it the right path? Is it too late to make a change? Or are there ways that they can leverage that degree to still go out into industry, but maybe pivot into something new?
Yeah. All of those things that you just mentioned are what I would try to uncover in a conversation. So each individual is going to be a little bit different in how that conversation goes and which corner it turns. But again, trying to find out what's underneath their question is what I strive to do. So I really, really encourage a lot of self reflection. And I try to ask questions that pinpoint and help them to think deeply, but more than deeply, it's more like let's dig into the details of this. So tell me about what you don't align with in this current work right now. What made you question it? But even before that, what made you get into this? Why did you decide to come to Michigan Tech and with this degree anyway? So that story always tells me it contains loads of information. Then their story of what changed has all kinds of information and clues that I use to then ask the next question, right? It's kind of like sleuthing a little
Mhm.
bit, right? And then kind of getting into, all right, if this is what you do really enjoy, where else, how can we nurture that? How can we grow that? What do we need to do if this is it really is about working with your strengths and your natural abilities and your skill sets versus focusing on your challenges and weaknesses that you feel like you need to grow. I think that the focus on the strengths, especially in times of overwhelm or of indecision, is most important. Let's ease the situation by looking at what feels and comes a little easier to you, and let's expand on that. And then from that conversation, then will often lead to, well, maybe it's just a matter of taking one more class that will help you make the final decision. Like, let's take one more class that gives you a little bit more information about this topic, and then see if that's going to help. Or maybe you need to go out and get some real life experience working in a job that interests you. Or maybe it's whatever it might be, but let's take one incremental step at a time so that you don't feel like you have to throw everything away or that everything has been a waste of time and now you got to start all over again, because that just adds to the overwhelm and the confusion and it can be quite distressing. So if we can take this like these incremental steps, there's nothing that's quite that fragile. There is still time. There's time to figure it out. And that is how I help students kind of figure some of those things out. It's not super prescriptive, it's very individual.
Well, and in that same realm, we'll give kind of a shameless plug here. So if you are a student at Michigan Tech having kind of these doubts, not really sure if you're in the right degree or what to do with that degree after graduation, come see us in career services. Like, we are here to help you navigate the waters. And it can be a very stressful time as graduation's approaching, and you're kind of trying to figure out what life looks like after college. So that's really what our office is here for, is to help you be successful in that transition from college to career, and anything beyond as well.
Yes, I agree. And sometimes it's tapping into the other people we know across campus that can help answer that question. So we don't work in a bubble here, right? We really try to connect all students with people, whether they're advisors or faculty or other staff that can also help answer those questions.
Earlier in the episode, we were talking about kind of success, failure, and maybe that self doubt, as you're trying to figure things out. And there's almost a stigma around not using your degree, quote unquote, the way it was intended. What kind of advice would you give a student from like an open opportunity mindset, where maybe there's something that they didn't really expect that they could do as they're trying to figure out what to do, rather than kind of putting themselves in that box of, oh, I got an engineering degree, I need to be an engineer?
So there has been of this move towards skills-based hiring. What that means is that there are companies and recruiters who are looking beyond the degree and looking at what kind of skills this potential candidate has, and that is the focus, is this, it's the skills that they possess. So if you kind of break down what it is that, if you have an engineering degree, if you have a psychology degree, if you have an English degree, what is your skill set? I think if you can narrow down and really think about what is the skill set, then you can look for jobs that require that skill set that you would then be qualified for. Now, if you are a psychology student who has the skill set of an engineer, you wouldn't be able to, you wouldn't be qualified for an engineering job without that degree, right? There's always caveats to this. However, actually, I have found things like ChatGPT to help brainstorm those types of things. So you can prompt, or maybe Google it. You don't have to use ChatGPT. You can Google it, but just something that's going to help you kind of generate ideas on, like, what is the skill set of someone with a psychology major? What are some of the main skills? And then see where those skills can be applied. And you will often find that there are a lot of different avenues that you can take with us if you're focused on a skill set.
And that kind of brings us full circle back to the concept of your degree proves you know how to learn, and that's not as important as the skills you possess when looking for those jobs. And so, leveraging AI and looking at job descriptions and Google and kind of building that puzzle of all of these pieces to help you identify opportunities, I think is a really good way to go about it, because there may be some other industry or even job title that you didn't even know existed, but could be a perfect match for your skill set and maybe even something you're passionate about.
Yes, there is a resource. It's called ONET online, ONET online, and it is populated by the Department of Labor. And so it has a lot of great information. If you can just put in the search bar what your interests are, it then gives you the language that you need. So, in other words, it helps you to see what kind of job titles are out there under that interest. It can help you know what skill sets that are required for that particular job title and position. And to me too, that type of tool is really helpful to, again, think in terms of how you communicate your skill set on a document like a resume, in a way that an employer will go, oh, I know what that means, and oh, I see how that applies. And so it all goes hand in hand. It really is about, first of all, thinking in terms of what it is that you are most interested, but how can you articulate that well on these professional documents, and then in like in an interview, for instance, as well.
Well, and in the show notes for this episode, we can include the link to that. So if folks do
Mhm.
want to go check it out, we'll make it really easy for you to kind of go explore and see what additional information they can dig out up on the internet. So you've come pretty far in your career, I would say. And if you could go back in time and give yourself some kind of advice while you were at in your student phase of learning, what type of advice would you give yourself knowing what you know now?
I would tell my younger student self not to worry so much. That having to decide all of this right now feels urgent, but it isn't that fragile. So I often say this to students now because I wished I would have said this to myself then. When when a person is in a mode of stress and distress over having to make a decision with urgency, a part of our brain kicks in that keeps us in more of a fight, flight, freeze mode, right? We are not using the frontal lobe of our brain in those moments. We are back in our brainstem just trying to get through this situation. And what happens then is our eyes, our vision narrows, our hearing narrows, and we miss out on potential opportunities because everything is narrowed down just to get us through this particular moment in time. So, to the practice of just kind of sitting, breathing, relaxing into this question that we might have helps us to move away from that brainstem kind of functioning and into our frontal lobe where our vision literally expands, our hearing expands, and all of a sudden we see opportunities that we cannot see when we're under duress and in that stress. So if I could have convinced myself, reminded myself at that time to just, it's okay, take it easy. You don't have to worry so much about this, that would have been really, really helpful. And I'd like to pass on that advice to anybody who is open to receive that or could use that as some advice right now.
Well, and as somebody, let's see, I'm 6 years past graduation now. Um, I remember that time of what am I going to do now? A lot of my friends already had their job offers signed, sealed, delivered, and I was waiting back for next rounds of interviews because I was focused on a specific industry in a specific geographical location. And so I kind of did have those blinders on and was like, no, I don't want this other opportunity. I was so hyper focused on the one thing I was aiming for that I probably put extra stress on myself that I really didn't need. When in a situation like that, like you said, just kind of take a step back, kind of reflect on it, and realize that it's not the end of the world. You're just stepping into your career and there's so many more things ahead of you that you can't even fathom at this point. um, and being open to those opportunities, open to pivoting, and once you're out in industry you'll get a better understanding of whether or not it's an industry you're passionate about. Does it fit your goals, your values? Are you in a geographical location that kind of gives you that work-life balance you're looking for? And so like you were saying, don't add all of those things on top of each other. Just take it one step at a time. And it's never too late to pivot or start over. Even though that is scary, it's always an option at any point during your career.
When you feel like you are in choice and that you have a choice, that's what makes the biggest difference. As soon as you feel like you don't have a choice, then it feels like you're in prison. And that is no way to function, right? Yeah.
No, not at all.
Trying not to force it because I think there are so many individuals, so many students who maybe are here because engineering means that you're going to, if you have an engineering degree, it means you're going to get a good job. And that's why they're here. And it might be not because it's where their skill set lies. It's just because this is where I'm assured a good job. And then we kind of have to force things sometimes if those skills and abilities do not match up to our natural kind of way that we show up in this world, the way that we naturally function. Because then it gets really like we expend a lot of energy trying to force these things that do not come naturally. It's not as sustainable. It might not be as long lasting, and it certainly is not as satisfying. So if there's a way to all along the way kind of check in with yourself, like, is this still right for me? Is this aligned with, am I forcing this? Or is this something that I truly am interested in and that although it challenges me and it can be hard, am I forcing it? Am I making it happen versus am I just learning a new skill that I'm actually really excited to learn? So that kind of self-reflection all along the way, I feel like can help you to course correct if it's necessary to course correct before it's urgent.
Well, and that reminds me of the conversation I had in our last episode with Paige. And she was talking about there's a difference between something being hard and something being too hard. And having to determine that distinction is important because it's good to challenge yourself and learn new skills. But if you're at a point where it's too hard and you're setting yourself up for failure, it may not be the right path. And like you said, you don't want to be forcing something to fit just because you thought that's what you were supposed to do. So I thought that was kind of a good way to phrase it in our last episode is know the
Yeah.
difference between hard and too hard, and then kind of use that to evaluate your decision making going forward and kind of shaping your path. So, before we wrap up today, if students are looking to connect with you or get resources from career services, what's the best way for them to do that?
So if you are looking for a one-on-one appointment for career advising, you can go through Handshake and do that. If that feels challenging to you or you aren't set up to do that, you can email career@mtu.edu. And from there, you can reach out to, or that email will find its way to one of the career advisors.
Perfect. And we're just going to add a little behind the scenes info on this episode. So, Melissa and I were actually the two who kind of came up with the idea of wanting to create this career focused podcast. So, she's done a lot of work behind the scenes to make this a reality. And now she gets to be one of our guests in our first season as well. So, it's really cool to see this come full circle from an idea we had a few months ago to working on the branding, the identity, and now actually recording episodes as we prepare to launch this new series for students.
You're a rock star, Ryan. I appreciate it. It's been really fun.
Well, thank you for taking time out of your day today to chat with us about kind of the career journey that may not line up with your college degree. And if you guys found this conversation today helpful, be sure to subscribe to the podcast to stay up to date on all things Husky Careers Unleashed related. And again, if you need support at any time, you can always go to mtu.edu/career or reach out to us at career@mtu.edu. We look forward to sharing more stories with you in the near future, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.